Hi, and welcome to the Security Professionals Conference online. Thanks for joining our on-demand presentation, Remote Learning and Security, Enable Collaboration while Protecting Students, Faculty, and Data, presented by Netskope and Dell Technologies. Our presenters are JRB of Dell Technologies, Senior Manager, Product Marketing, Unified Workspace, joined by James Christiansen of Netskope, VP of Cloud Security Transformation and the leader of the Global Chief Strategy Office. I'd like to introduce JRB. Take it away. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for watching this today. As was said just now, we are here to today talk about remote learning and security. Really, how do we enable collaboration while protecting the students and faculty and data, more specifically in the higher education institutions. If you take a step back and look at this is more like a quote rather than a statement rather than a quote. Cybersecurity can no longer be an afterthought. It has to be intrinsic to the IT infrastructure. What do I mean by this? So if you really look at the evolution of cybersecurity industry over the past decade or so, the lot of that has happened by industry consolidation, vendors acquiring vendors, and in the process of doing that, acquiring technologies and then bolting on top of what they already have. But I'm also encouraged by the fact that there is, I feel like the industry is undergoing some tectonic shift and some fantastic new technologies coming into play that are putting Good Samaritans like us at the forefront of being able to deal with the adversaries. Educause does this annual surveys, and IT security has been among the top, if not at the very top, concern for the last several years. So it continues to be a challenge even in a normal circumstances. But it has gotten much more amplified in the current cybersecurity landscape, more specifically due to the COVID pandemic. As is always said, cybersecurity is an arms race, and it continues to be so. While we build stronger and stronger defenses, the adversaries continue to build more and more offensive mechanisms to breach systems. So it's a constant kind of battle between the good and evil that goes on. And it's gotten much worse in the recent past, thanks to the COVID pandemic, as you can see from this particular slide. What is interesting to note here is that some of the tried, proven, and trusted mechanisms such as phishing, social engineering are used much more so extensively today. From the example seen here, phishing attacks are up by nearly 40%. With all that said, I think as cybersecurity professionals, as IT decision makers, it's extremely important for us to ground ourselves on certain cybersecurity realities. Cybersecurity has always been and will always be about reducing the attack surface. That doesn't change pre or post COVID. What are these attack surfaces? Again, as I said, the way we compute, the way we work with the IT and infrastructure has changed quite a bit over the last decade. Think about the number of devices we use. There is proliferation of devices on one end. That increases the attack surface. There are more operating systems that we deal with now that increases the attack surface. Our users and tutors and students want to work from many different locations. They use increasingly cloud applications. That is also adding to the stress in the system. When I talk to IT decision makers and security decision makers, oftentimes for them, it's an either or situation between dealing with cybersecurity issues on one side, but at the same time, really allowing their users to access and share and collaborate without a lot of impediments. So that's how the industry views it today. It's like you can either give users unfettered access, they can really work anywhere, anytime, and in the process have more security risks, or you can lock everything down. And in the process, you're safe, but you're no longer really fostering that collaboration that higher education institutes really want to do. So finding a balance between these two has been a really hard thing for most IT organizations to do. However, as I said earlier, I think I'm also encouraged by the fact that the industry is starting to undergo shifts in how they view cybersecurity. It's no longer just having a conversation about a bunch of tools. Yes, tools are necessary and they're going to form a part of a stack to try and deal with the adversaries, but it's much more so than that, and we'll come back and talk about it shortly. But again, as you think about all this from an organization's perspective, what do educational institutions like you want? The most common answer I get is you want student success, which is fantastic. But in order to enable student success, and again, everything that you see on this slide, they're all kind of interlinked. Like in order to enable student success, you have to foster an ambience of collaboration and learning. And to do that, you have to have open communications, not lock everything down, that people want to be able to have access to content and information to learn and thrive. Give them unfettered access, and then also choice in terms of devices, operating systems, where they work from, how many cloud applications that they use, and so on and so forth. That's really what you want. But again, like I said, the security impediments are stopping you from doing that. Now, how can organizations go so in a methodical way to try and tackle all this? The most common and the most comprehensive framework that I have seen or come across is the NIST cybersecurity framework. Most of you might be aware of this. It basically recommends these 5 categories: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And for organizations looking at a more comprehensive assessment of their cybersecurity posture, can look at all these 5 buckets and see what are the areas and how do they rank, and how do they do against each of these areas. But the reality that, again, most IT organizations face is no one has unlimited budget. They're always asked to do more with less. Stacking up more tools doesn't necessarily help solve all the problems. In the process, it actually makes it difficult and sucks up a lot of computing resources. So what I have seen many organizations do is, it's good to keep NIST framework and look at it comprehensively, but also look at what are some of your biggest vulnerability areas. As it stands today in the COVID environment, phishing, ransomware, and some of these kind of techniques are very highly being deployed, which means that having effective mechanisms against those are going to be very critical. It's also a question of what is important to protect for an organization like yours or an institution like yours, and do you have the right protection mechanisms for the most important information that you are trying to protect, is where I would start. At Dell Technologies, we are all about looking across the layers. Now, this specific slide refers to all of the different layers within the endpoint security space specifically. It's not enough to look at protecting just external malware or ransomware. You have to look at all of these increasing vulnerability and exposure areas of exposure, starting from supply chain all the way up to data and applications. So having a more comprehensive look and having mechanisms to protect each and every one of these layers is going to be critical. At Dell Technologies, we are making an effort to build a lot of these into our devices so that you don't have to always stack up 20 more agents to get these done, right? So we are all about reducing the number of tools, reducing the number of agents as much as we can, while providing customers like you the ability and the visibility across this entire layers of endpoint security infrastructure. So that's one way to look at it. Have you covered for all of these vulnerabilities is one way to look at it. But going beyond endpoint, if you look at what are really the building blocks of an effective security posture from an entire infrastructure perspective, we talk about 5 security control points. These are endpoint, identity, workload, cloud, and network. Now, if you look at any organization, they're all looking at it. Very often, there are different teams, different systems and tools that are focusing on each of these security control points. But therein lies the problem, that not all of these systems talk to each other, communicate with each other, share threat intelligence and telemetry with each other. So all of these are siloed efforts, stack up of tools, obviously, sucking up system resources. So our effort at Dell Technology, and also partnering with our Netskope here, our aim and intent as we move forward is that we want to provide customers that framework and a way to analyze, assimilate telemetry coming from all of these security control points, have that broad spectrum view and visibility, so that you have a better context of what is happening in your environment. The reality of any major cyber attack is it could start at endpoint and it can laterally move into network or cloud or vice versa. So you want to have that broader visibility across, and we want to be able to provide that. But in the process of doing that, we want to minimize the agents, make it agentless where possible, and more importantly, share and give you the ability to analyze telemetry and take better and faster action. So that's going to be very critical in not just what we are saying from a Dell technology perspective, but just how I see the industry shifting and changing. That is going to give organizations the ability to stop the next data breach from happening, or to stay ahead of the adversary. A related topic to this is also what I call bridging the divide between IT and security. This can be teams, it can be systems, it can be processes. There are organizations where IT and security all roll up under a single department, and then there are organizations or institutions where they are completely different. No matter the case, the challenge still continues, which is being able to share intelligence and telemetry across and being able to react fast. So again, the purpose of what I showed on the previous slide is to bring all this together for organizations like you, and be able to bridge this divide. Last but not the least, I would leave you with the thought that it's not just about tools anymore, right? Tools are important. You have to have a stack of tools. We hope it's not 70 or 80 or 100. We hope it to be as less number of agents as you need as possible. But it's much more about tools. It's about telemetry, and taking the rapid action, as I said earlier. With that said, I would like now to transition over to my friend here, James. I know that most of the organizations and educational institutions are somewhere in the process of their digital transformation journey. I also read this statistic pretty recently that pre and post COVID, within a matter of a month or a month and a half, the cloud adoption, the public cloud adoption went up by nearly 64%. I want to get your thoughts on how customers can deal with this rapid digitalization and be better prepared to deal with these modern security threat landscape.
Hey, great. Thanks, JRB, for that great opening. Really fascinated by what you had to say there. And yeah, it's been such a shift with the shift to remote workers and the usage in the internet. And what's amazing is just how much digitalization is impacting our workforce and our systems. You know, 90% of the devices being sold now are mobile devices, and they're on-prem only like 50% of the time. And certainly that right now is about zero because of the current remote worker situation that we're going through. And about 85% of that traffic has moved from web access to cloud access. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a minute. And when we look at enterprises and higher ed out there, we're seeing that there's actually more off-prem applications now than on-prem. We've seen a big shift in that. And it's amazing when you think about how much digitalization has impacted our culture. In just the 1 minute I took to go through this slide, if you look at the stats there, Tinder, 1.4 million people clicked in just that 1 minute. That's kind of comforting. But as we look at the mobilization of our learning environment, what we'll see is there's really this expectation that our young and bright are bringing to the table of wanting to actually work from any device they have, whether it be a cell phone, a tablet, or a laptop, that they want to be able to access any application, whether it be go out and check the news, or actually go to a personal site, or even a corporate site, of course. They want to work from any location, whether that be on campus, at home, at the cafe. It's an absolute demand these days. They want to be able to share that information through the internet, through their internet access, whether that be patient records, research, pictures. And of course, we want to enable them to do all these things. We want to enable them certainly to do that securely. And for higher ed, there's such a preponderance of BYOD that this is a huge concern, or in a huge way we've got to go through to secure these applications. And one of the key things to keep in mind is that we've really shifted to where data is no longer on the computers we own. and we're running across networks we don't control. So that means we have to think differently in our security programs. We have to change that paradigm. So we looked at this evolution of the cloud and inspection, and we've gone from having, the ability through firewalls to do URL filtering, and our core problem was there is to keep the bad guys out and let good guys in. We've seen a big shift in that where we want to really be able to access all these applications, and we see that that a very small percentage now is actually managed by IT, things like Office 365 or G Suite. We see through business digitalization that we're getting 95 to 98% of the apps that folks are using out there to better themselves are really coming through these unmanaged systems. And then we're getting like 39,000 different apps out there they can access through cloud things. And the higher eds, they have a real preponderance of different cloud applications and want to be able to enable the grad students, the financial aid, research, patient data to all be able to access this securely. To be able to do that, you have to actually go to a layer below just HTTP inspection. You've got to be able to get down into the JSON code and be able to decode that and be able to look closely at what they're doing. And that's one of the unique things that we found is that you need to be in line, of course, to be able to see what's going on. And of course, we need to be able to inspect that data to see if it's sensitive data and even see where they're going, whether that's going to a OneDrive that is managed by the higher ed institution, or they're going to a personal OneDrive, and be able to understand the difference between those two is critical. And then as we start to look at, as I think we talked about a little earlier, this opportunity we have right now, there's never been a more exciting time to be in security and be able to manage a security organization as you think about your future. Gartner came out last October with a new paper. They outlined something called SASE, which is the Secure Access Service Edge. What SASE is really the combination of network as a service and security as a service, and bringing those two things together in a single architecture so they can interact and be integrated. And what that gives us is a real ability now to start looking at how we provide the end services. We talked about those numbers. We've got to be able to get those through and do all the security, but we can't slow the things down. So as we think about this is really driven through the network traffic inversion. What we started to see is more data coming direct from the internet to these applications than coming out of our organizational networks. So that inversion really is important to systems to be able to think about where it's going to. And that digital business transformation that we talked about really requires SASE. So as you look at the slide in front of you, you'll notice that we have the different things plugging in, whether it be a branch out there, a remote device, a BYOD device, or the internet applications, be able to link them through the security as a service and network as a service and get them back to the endpoints they need to get to. A huge change in what we've been doing in security. And of course, we've often heard of the Zero Trust platform. That starts with cloud security. I've got to get them from the identity through the endpoint, and then, of course, the user behavior analysis and system automation. So we look at the secure cloud, it's really to be able to look at that web traffic. That's things like CNN, where you're just going out to maybe check the weather. A SaaS application might be to your organizational email. An IS system, which is really now the data center backup. And then, of course, private access, the ability to access an application in your backend systems through the cloud and be able to do that securely. That has to tie very closely and very integrated with identity management. And identity management is really about authenticating that user and be able to understand who they are. And then as JRB pointed out, the endpoint is so important. We have so many unmanaged devices. We have so many devices that are accessing these different organizations that we need to be able to focus on an endpoint, and that threat intel exchange you see there is key to being able to manage these things, as we can share things from the cloud to the endpoint, endpoint to cloud to protect our end users. And then, of course, operations, ability to understand user behavior and our system operations and automate those things. So as we move past all of that and we start thinking, how does this all come together? And this is really the key for today, is that we need to provide real-time protection. We need to be in line. We can pre-filter, we can watch for antivirus at the network layer or at the endpoint layer. We can bring in that global threat intelligence and react to it through our cloud and endpoint security programs. This is sort of a 1 + 1 = 3 situations where working with Dell Technologies and Carbon Black and the Netskope platforms, we're able to bring these things together and really do that deep protection. Of course, that exchange is part of the integration here that we both enjoy, and be able to do those IOCs and cloud filtering and monitoring. With that, I just want to leave you with 3 key points. First, universities, they're unfortunately need to do more with less. It's a continuing problem. So that ability to leverage an architecture like SASE and SASE providers that will lower your costs and increase your capabilities. Security is a journey, and now's the time to think about your threat landscape, the dwell time that you're going to spend on the systems, how long, and of course lowering that attack journey. And then of course leveraging your zero trust model. The zero trust model will get you that authentication you need and be able to take advantage of all these things. With that, JR, I think I'll turn it back to you.
Hey, thank you so much. That was really enlightening to learn about SASE and why cloud is at the very center of most of the digital transformation, how organizations should be thinking about it. I think this certainly is a paradigm shift that institutions need to take into account. With that said, again, we spent the last 20 minutes or so talking about starting with really understanding what the security posture should be, how it's evolving, the threat landscape, and what are some of the best practices to look at IT infrastructure holistically, but also more specifically to cloud. This slide hopefully brings everything back in terms of what the educational institutions should be doing as next step forward. Now, as I said, there are certain immediate needs that they need to tackle in the current COVID pandemic, but a good, sound, and foundational security posture is going to help take it much farther. So the 5 things that I would advise all of our customers to focus on is really start by identifying and assessing security risks. Before you add one more tool to the toolkit, it's important to understand if what your primary vulnerabilities are, what are some of the biggest systems and data sets that you're trying to protect, and what your risk is against those. The next is to Jason's point, is really about reassessing your security architecture. We no longer live in the perimeter-centric environment. That is gone. Most of the security systems were designed for a perimeter-centric world. We have moved past that. So it's time to reassess your security architecture more from how the way you all work and operate and communicate, but also the way the security landscape itself has evolved. Both of that require you to assess the architecture. The third important thing to keep in mind is, and I say establish your security posture, because like I said, you can talk to consultants and look at frameworks. They all make a lot of recommendations, but it's going to ultimately come back to balancing your risks with the budget you have. So it's really about what is the right security posture for your organization to balance both of these out. Fourth aspect is the game of cybersecurity will be won or lost based on who has the best cross-organizational telemetry and the ability to act on the telemetry, right? And that obviously is the one that offers you visibility. So really focus on broader visibility across the 5 security control points I talked about: endpoint, network, cloud, workloads, and identity. And last but not the least, many organizations struggle with not having the right resources. As it stands today, there is about 4 million labor shortage of qualified security analysts. So definitely seek outside help. We have companies like SecureWorks that have a deep bench of expertise built over 20 years. People that can identify that needle in a haystack that sometimes is very hard to find. With that, that's a wrap on this session. Thank you so much for your patient attention on this. I would like to transfer this back now to the organizers to wrap up.
Thank you again to JRB and James. Appreciate your time in presenting for us. I'd like to make sure that we invite everybody to visit our booth for a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. That is the Dell and Netskope virtual booth. Hope to see you there, and we can answer questions in our chat over at our virtual booth. Thanks again for attending, and have a great visit to the Security Professionals Conference. Thank you.